President Trump knows how he wants to spend the 4th of July, signing a historic piece of legislation to extend his tax cuts, fund deportations, and fulfill core promises to end taxes on tips and overtime. But with just 8 days to go, Republicans in Congress are facing a major procedural setback that is putting that timeline in serious doubt. I want to get CNN congressional correspondent Lauren Flax here to explain. So, Lauren, what are you hearing about the chances that this bill could get to Donald Trump's desk by July 4th?
Yeah, there was a major ruling this morning by the Senate parliamentarian that casts into doubt one of the key pay-fors that Republicans had included in this bill dealing with Medicaid provider taxes. And it's really an important issue for Republicans because without this pay-for, now they're sort of scrambling, trying to find out if they can go back to the drawing board and trying to finalize legislative text as well as get all the votes that they need in line in order to move this bill by the end of the weekend, which had been the goal of Republican leadership. John Thune making clear just a few minutes ago to our colleague Allie Main that this is really in flux at the moment. And it's not clear whether they're going to be able to do this in short order because they don't control how quickly the Senate parliamentarian, who is the arbiter of Senate rules, deals with these issues. Here's a couple other Republicans on the fact that this timeline could be slipping, Manu.
You think that changes the time frame here at all?
That could. I mean, I don't know. That's a good question. The leader would know. I just don't know how quick they can redraft, and they'll have to go back in front of her. So this is the Arcania part of the Senate procedure.
Do you think that this potentially sets you back in terms of your timing? Can you really pass this by July 4th?
Leadership and see about that.
And Manu, you know as well as anyone, this has to get through the Senate, but then it has to go back over to the House of Representatives, where Speaker Johnson is going to have to wrangle his Republican members in order to get this through his chamber. That all would have to happen in just a little over a week's time. Next Friday is 4th of July.
Yeah, they have to meet the procedural issues and get the votes and rewrite parts of the bill. Very difficult to do all that by that time frame. Lauren Fox, thank you so much. And here at the table, Mariana Sotomayor of the Washington Post joins us as well. And Mariana, you also walk those halls with Lauren and me every single day. This is what the speaker just told our colleagues on Capitol Hill. He said, it doesn't make it easier. This is the ruling against a key portion of the bill that was just struck out because it does not meet the budget rules. Of course, that needs to be met in order to pass the bill along straight party lines in the Senate, meaning just Republican votes. He says, the speaker said, it doesn't make it any easier to make it to the July 4th deadline, but hope springs eternal, and we're going to work around the clock to try to meet that deadline. But what are you hearing about the challenges ahead to meet that deadline?
Oh, we always talk about how difficult these hurdles are. I think this is probably the biggest obstacle to come that either of us have experienced so far. And the reason why is because the Senate has really changed this bill. You add this parliamentarian who, of course, is the arbiter of all the rules of what can be included in this. And a lot of things are being taken out. And it's really angering a number of Republicans on the House side. Obviously, on the Senate, that's the first hurdle. But House Republicans are really not liking how this bill has been changed. For the most part, the math is not mathing.
Yes.
And that really upsets the Freedom Caucus, who for years have been saying we need to reduce the size of the federal government and we need to reduce the deficit. You also have moderates.
This bill does neither.
No. And with more that we're seeing, including this latest ruling that the parliamentarian said on this Medicaid provision, essentially what it does is what she's saying is that you should not include any provision that would allow some of these states to pay for undocumented immigrants being able to access health care. That's been a huge talking point for a number of Republicans. It's going to make for an interesting afternoon where at the White House there's going to be this huge messaging pitch where they're trying to sell this bill to the American public, all while both Senate and House Republicans are really bickering over a number of these policies. It can make it really difficult.
And there's so much. This bill, we call it a mega bill, a policy, because there's so many issues and just a handful of them. Not only would it extend the 2017 tax cuts permanently, business and individual tax cuts, which would cost trillions of dollars, but also new work requirements on social safety net programs, dealing with no taxes on tips and overtime, phasing out those Biden-era green energy tax credits, money for the Pentagon, hundreds of billions of dollars for the Pentagon, border security, and the like, and then raise the debt ceiling, the Senate plan would, by $5 trillion. And then, but there are the sticking points. The Medicaid cuts are sticking points, how to deal with state and local tax deductions. That is a huge fight that could actually derail the bill in the House. And then phasing out the tax credits, and those Freedom Caucus members that Mariana was talking about, they want those out immediately. Senate Republicans, not so sure. There are so many issues. But here's my question. You cover the White House. Yep. Trump is demanding this by July 4th. There is no reason for this to be done by July 4th other than the fact that he wants to just have it done by July 4th. Will he be open to delaying this past July 4th?
We have seen him, move the goalposts, in situations like this before, particularly when something is going through Congress like this. But the sense of urgency is also rooted in that this bill has so many things in it, but also it has funding for some major parts of his domestic policy agenda, right? Money for immigration enforcement and those mass deportations. That's this bill. Also, a lot of provisions, just to zoom out, that impact his supporters as well. When you talk about Medicaid, when you talk about SNAP benefits, not only does it expose different fissures in the Republican Party, but also when you talk about the funding that he needs to accomplish many things that he campaigned on, that's also this bill. I'm also interested, just in terms of this White House event today, I'm going to be there going to that event, how much actually he uses this moment to push for this bill and not for some of the things that we talked about in the previous segment as well, maybe criticizing the media and media coverage as well. But look, they want this thing to be pushed. They're feeling the sense of urgency. We don't often see an effective pep rally at the White House for a bill that still we don't know what's going to be in it.
They're gambling that, or they're betting, the Republican leadership is, that Trump's pressure campaign will be effective and that these members don't want to endure his wrath by voting against it. But this bill is just not popular to the public because they have not been able, the Republicans have not sold it effectively to the public. Just as one poll, this has been consistent with other polls as well, just 38% of the public favor this plan, in part because people really don't understand what's in it. They call it a big, beautiful bill, but what's in it? And the members themselves, if they have to vote on this by this weekend or next week, they won't even have time to read it either.
Yeah, and I'm going to put a caveat and say, depending on what passes, some of what I'm about to say might change. Okay, but we are all understandably in the weeds. If you're covering this, you need to know exactly what's in it, what the parliamentary situation is, all that stuff. If you're a member of the public and you're thinking, why should I care about this? One of the big selling points that the president and his team are going to make, that Republicans will make, is tax cuts, because everybody likes the sound of a tax cut. But what the early analysis have shown is that if you're kind of in the middle band of Americans, you're earning maybe, I think, up to about $120,000 or less. This is going to mean $1,000 in your pocket over the course of a year. It's about $40 per paycheck. $40 for $4 trillion in deficit spending. And so, and if you're lower income, if you're $50,000 or below, this might net you $300 in tax cuts per year. So about $1 a day, less than $1 a day. But will reduce your accessibility to Medicaid and social welfare provisions. And so one of the big political questions, if this passes, the reason the president wants it to pass is so he can show he can get things done. Because one thing we hear again and again from centrist voters as well as base voters is you might not like everything Donald Trump does, but he's getting stuff done. But the flip side is the minute this thing passes, if it passes, you're going to have a massive messaging campaign where critics of the president are going to be saying, this was a wealth transfer to wealthy people away from people with less money, and it reduced the safety net of people who rely on these services.
And that's going to be the debate as we head into the midterms. It's going to define the entire midterm elections when and if this does pass. The question is when it passes, if it does. Assuming it does,
when it passes.
The real deadline is really before the August recess because they need to do something to avoid a debt default by probably the middle of summer and early fall. And there's that debt limit increase that's in the bill. So we'll see if Trump agrees to delay his own self-imposed deadline.